Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new and improved Movies to be Murdered by. Yay! Thank you to the oh so talented and kind Jeffrey Watson Esquire, the lawyer to all horror movies that we discuss here. He did all the work on the intro, on this fabulous new setup, and he surprised me with it, which is awesome. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Hey,
What a
no
wonderful
problem.
treat.
No problem. It was fun to do, and I'm excited that we've kind of got a new format, and doing this video thing. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
excited.
definitely. Me too. So welcome to Movies to be Murdered by. I am your co-host, Jessie Drew, doctor of psychology to all the horror movies. And as I mentioned before, I'm here with my brother, Jeff Watson Esquire, the legal end of our operation here, the attorney to all of our horror movies. We consider our horror movies our friends. So when they get into any sort of legal trouble or we need some consultation, we go to Attorney Watson. When we need some sort of psychological profiling or analysis, you come to me. This week's film is Saint Maud. It was a 2019 movie, but I don't think it got released until 2020. And it is written and directed by Rose Glass. This is her feature film debut. I think she did a fantastic job. I'll just say that right off at the top so that you guys know where we're going with this. And we are going to be discussing all things Maud. So, Attorney Watson, are you ready?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So the movie follows Maud, who is a hospice nurse. We catch her as she's getting ready to enter into a new job, taking care of a woman who is a former dancer, famous for her choreography, living in London. We're never told exactly where, but it was recorded, I'm sorry, recorded. The film was made in London, even though there's was it Coney Island, like hot dogs or something that you see?
Yeah, it's weird because it's set in this coastal area, and then I got confused. I'm not gonna lie, I got confused because I see the big Coney Island sign, and I'm like, wait, what are we? But it's kind of cool because it's kind of this American feel in the UK, which I kind of appreciate.
I agreed. Agreed. I saw, like the Coney Island sign, and I was like, I mean, I know Coney Island, it's, down the street in Brooklyn from me. So I'm like, but where is this? Because it doesn't look like it, is it supposed to be like a studio version of, the Coney Island? No, it's just, but like you said, coastal town. Um, and everyone's got the accent. So we know we're in Great Britain somewhere. But Amanda, who is the dying dancer who Maud goes to take care of, she is an American, actually. But it's never explained why she's living there. We just assume that she, found safe haven there. And she's got this terrific, big old mansion. And so Maud is, thoughtfully packing up her things. And you see her walking through the town, which is kind of like gray and blustery, walking up, these steps that seem to go on forever. And the outgoing nurse basically just like on her way, literally out the door, like fills her in. And then she goes in and we start, seeing Maud taking care of her new charge. She's very thoughtful. She's very thorough. She's very I want to say antiseptic almost. Like she folds everything properly. She's, everything's clean, everything's dainty, everything is just right. And Amanda, her new charge, is, we don't really get too much of her. I think her real her real personality at first, but when we do, we get it pretty quickly. Um, I should also say that Maud, we see her, and she's very religious. She is Roman Catholic. We get a little bit of a glimpse of her previous history when she worked at the hospital. Something about one of her patients dying. It's never made. We're never told the whole story, but one of her patients died despite Maud trying to save her, and this was when Maud worked at the hospital. Um, we do get a scene where Maud is walking through the village, and someone is yelling out to her, but they're yelling out, "Katie, Katie, Katie," and she finally turns around, and she's like, and it's this woman, and she's like, "Oh, like, didn't you see me? Like, how are you? Like, what happened to you?" Kind of a, and Maud is, clearly we find out in that scene that Maud is not who we think she is, for unknown reasons. We're not told, but you're kind of assumed that it has to do with this person dying in her care at the hospital. The fact that she's changed her name, that she's now working as a private, like in private healthcare, not at a hospital. The fact that she's devoutly religious. It seems like she's converted recently. And this woman's trying to talk to her. She's very friendly. She's smoking a cigarette. She's like obviously out on the town. And she's like, "Yo, do you want to come out? Blah, blah, blah." And Maud's like, "No." And it's very clear she's uncomfortable and she just wants to get away from this lady, um, despite how nice she is. Okay. So she starts to realize that despite her best efforts, Amanda is not like Maud is like working like herself, like tooth and nail, to make sure that Amanda is well taken care of. It's like she feels it's her calling that she was placed with Amanda to really care for her and take care of her body and soul. So she has, Maud has these fits, I'll call them. She's got fits of ecstasy when she prays. So she's praying, and she's with Amanda and they're on the couch, and Maud starts being overwhelmed by this sense of Christ or God in her life. At that moment, it mimics her having a sort of sensual experience, we'll say.
Well,
It, it,
you know what? I'm just gonna call it what it is. It's an orgasmic experience for her.
it is.
That's what it is.
It is when she prays, or when she just there's when she prays, and then there's also at times she just becomes overwhelmed. Like she's walking up the stairs and all of a sudden she, kind of has one of those moments where she's like, "Ugh," and like she's seized by the spirit, and she seems to be having this type of orgasmic experience. Um, you know, what are your thoughts on dear old Maud?
I mean, and I definitely want to dive into this deeper as we discuss, but um, for me, this Maud in particular um, strikes me as someone who lived uh, a very interesting life before she found religion. And I feel like she is trying to overcompensate in ways to make up for past mistakes. And um, and she wants other people to kind of come along that journey with her, in particular Amanda, who she sees as this frail, declining woman that she's taking care of. And when Amanda doesn't do exactly how she wants, then it becomes very obvious that by some way or another, she's going to get the picture. And that's the way it comes across. And I think that Maud Um, this character is just so, for me, so deeply troubled, because there's a such thing as taking religion to an extent that is problematic and dangerous, in my opinion. Um, especially when it comes to to the self harm and doing certain things, uh, like especially with those thumbtacks.
Tax.
Woo! Spoiler alert, by the way. Yeah, the thumbtacks like that for me. It's like, listen, I consider myself a Christian, and I love the Lord, and I'm thankful for everything that He's done for me. I just don't know that I would put thumbtacks in my shoes and walk around and wince in pain the entire day. And it's not like she just took a few steps. I mean, she's walking all over the place. So for me, I just think she's a troubled individual that sees her role in her faith as being more than what it actually is. Like, instead of practicing her faith and, living in that truth for her, it's taken to a degree where she feels like she has to make sacrifices that, in all honesty, it's not really what's being asked of her. It's just more or less that's what she feels because she's still dealing with the past traumas, whether that's, the dealing with the guy that, that unfortunately did what he did and assaulted her, or it's, the losing of the patient before, despite her many attempts at CPR. Um, and then you think about her promiscuous past, and that's alluded to by the other guy, and it's just like she's trying to make up for the things that she's done, when in reality, and I'll get into this a little bit more because this brought up a lot of thoughts about religion, for me, but yeah, I just feel like she's trying to overcompensate and is to her detriment.
I totally agree, and I get your point of view completely. It's the cool thing about this. I will take it a step further. The cool thing about this movie, and by all means, like, this movie isn't your standard fare. It's really like a portrait of Maud, and it's on the slow side. We get some cool special effects and whatnot towards the very end. So if you're looking for that, this isn't the movie for you. um but I will, like, take what you said a step further and say that I thought this director, and she also wrote the movie, did a really good job. And I think this is tough to pull off. I think this is tough to pull off without being gimmicky in a film, where they balance this dance. And it's, no pun intended, because Amanda's a dancer or whatever, but it's really this dance between, is she more than just a delusional, you know, young woman who's dealing with these demons, that are coming up and expressing themselves in delusional thinking, in, paranoid thinking, um, and self-injurious behavior? Or could she, like, I think the title of the movie alludes to it, Saint Maud, like, or is she just actually kind of following the path of so many of the saints and holy people before her? We hear stories about the saints. I'm not going to get into all of them, but one of the most famous ones, for people who are not of the Christian or Catholic faith, Saint Joan of Arc. Most of us are familiar with that. And if you're not, here it goes. Saint Joan of Arc was a child when she started hearing voices. And as she, grew a little bit older, by a little bit older, I mean, by the time she was like 12, 13 years old, she recognized that to her, those were the voices of the saints, three saints, Saint Michael and, oh man, I'm messing it up. I don't remember the other two saints. I think Saint Catherine and another saint, but there were three saints that were very important to her. She claimed that They were the ones speaking to her. They were the ones who told her that she was to um, lead an army that would get the Dauphin of France crowned king. This was during the Hundred Years' War between Britain and France, and she did. She she did. She went to where the Dauphin was. They tricked her and said, if God really sent you, you'll find him in this room full of people. And it was like a huge hall full of strangers, all noble people. He was not dressed like a prince, and she picked him out. She was guided. She said God was guiding her every move and was telling her and was giving her messages. We hear that now, and what we hear is a girl who's possibly paranoid schizophrenic with an early onset, which happens, during adolescence, and we would be looking to see if anyone in her family, also had this pathology, and treat her with psychiatric meds. But at that time, people believed her. And so whether it was true by our standards or whether it was not true, it was true because people believed her and because she said it was true. And then because they believed her, she was able to lead an army and help get the prince crowned king. And then what happened afterwards was that they sold her out. Her own country sold her out. Her king sold her out. The English kidnapped her. He wouldn't pay a ransom and he didn't send anybody to go get her. They put her on trial. They claimed she was a witch, among many other things. And they eventually burned her because she recanted her story because she was terrified of being murdered at the hands of the English. And then she recanted her recant and was like, I can't go against what I believe is true, which is that God has always been with me and he's guided me. So do what you will. If I have to die, then that's what it is. And they burned her alive. So we get this, and we can look back at the story of Saint Joan of Arc and kind of like do that. Is she or wasn't she in our heads? But to see something on film that really brings us back and forth quietly. Is this woman, is she well? Is she not well? She seems to be acting from like a part of herself that is very strong, perseveres, and is doing what she thinks is right, is very self-righteous, And I mean, we see her when she's packing and we see her when she returns to her house. And we'll get to that in a second. When she returns to her apartment, it's just her. We get no sense of any sort of family. We get no sense of friends except for this one woman that, called her Katie. It's just her in this one room, tiny little studio and God and her images. So, but let me back up to kind of finish telling the plot. So basically what happens is Maud, it becomes aware of Amanda's dalliances, including, she has friends come over now and again. They seem to be really only interested in like doing drugs with or drinking with Amanda and kind of taking advantage of her hospitality and the fact that she is dying and desperate for company. So they take advantage of that. That's the vibe that I got. Mm-hmm. And then she notices a woman who starts coming by, and she started like sneaks a peek, and she sees that Amanda and this woman are having, relations in Amanda's room, and money is exchanged, and this woman leaves and comes and goes only at nighttime. And Maud's not stupid. She realizes this is an escort and Amanda's been, paying this woman to come over and be her lover. And as you can suspect, Maud does not like this and she does not approve of this. She like forcefully tells this woman, I don't want you coming by here. I don't want you disturbing Amanda. It's up to me to take care of her and you're not doing her any good. And so the woman is very savvy. You could see, like, at first she's like, don't tell me what to do, but then she kind of registers that Maud is not about to give in. So she's like, okay, no problem. I won't be back. No sweat off my back, whatever. Next thing we know, Amanda's throwing herself a huge birthday bash. It's probably going to be her last one. She's got like stage 4 lymphoma or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So Maud is there. She is helping the wait staff by cutting up like all of the hors d'oeuvres, et cetera, et cetera. She's out there like putting out plates, in the middle of the party. That she brings out the cake. There's like a billion people there, and they're all these like sort of the same sort of type that I mentioned before. They're there for a good time. Their sincerity is questionable, whether they really care. They just want to like eat, drink, and go away. Like none of them seem to really, give two craps about Amanda or anybody else. They just want to have a good time. And she's wealthy, so there's plenty of booze and drugs and food. Um, so Maud's standing there, like kind of setting out some plates, and Amanda starts telling the people on the couch, her guests, about how, because Carol's there. Carol is the courtesan, the escort, whatever you want to call her, her girlfriend, whatever. She's there, and Maud sees her and is kind of, like not very pleased to see her, but she can't say anything in the middle of the party, whatever. And Amanda's telling people, did you know that Maud tried to get Carol to stay away from me? Like, and she's mocking Maud. She's like, she's such a little saint. She's like, trying to save me. Like, and she's just so nasty. And she has that tone that rich people take when they're speaking of the people that they think are less than, like inferior to them, which could be the help, which could be just, like Maud is her nurse, so she's not on equal footing, anyone at all, maybe people who don't have money, they take this like mocking tone of like, oh,
Very
what a
condescending and
so
smug. Yeah.
condescending and smug. You nailed it. And she's totally mocking her. And she's like, she tried to get Carol to leave me alone because she's trying to save my soul. Isn't that so, Maud? Aren't you trying to save my soul? Because like at first you're thinking, oh, Amanda doesn't know she's standing right there. And then you're like, okay, Amanda can't not know that she's standing right there because she's standing right there. Everyone's laughing. Everyone's just enjoying, like, making fun of Maud and laughing. And it's this sense of like these godless people. So it's like, it's again, this is where the movie, I think, is brilliant. Because we find out that, like Amanda's an atheist. She doesn't believe in any of this, despite her pretending at first to like really get into the whole sensuality of these visions and stuff that Maud has. I mean, these prayers that Maud gets, these like sort of almost epileptic waves, that chase her. Like Amanda plays along and pretends that she's in on it too, that she's, really feeling it. But it turns out Amanda's actually an atheist and she doesn't believe in any of this. And so it's this sense in this party scene that these party goers are like these bougie or artistic types that are very self-centered, and they are so happy to mock God, basically, because Maud is there, and like if we're going to look at it that way, as like a representation of the divine, of like somebody who's there against all odds to help this woman who's dying, to help reclaim her soul, right? And that's literally, she feels, as her mandate. She's like, I know I have a sense of purpose. It's to help Amanda. And they're just there laughing at her, just like Christ was mocked, on his way to Golgotha. Like he's just mocked at every turn. Like people are laughing at him and stuff, and they don't know they're laughing at the real thing. So that's where this movie, if you want to look at it that way, kind of takes this little, two-step around the room. It's like, are they mocking somebody who's like actually like, a witness and testament to faith, or are they laughing at somebody who's, pathetic, like, and trying to help this woman who obviously doesn't want to be helped in that way. And Maud just gets so incensed by how nasty. I mean, Amanda's really nasty to her. I give it to Maud, whether she's wrong or she's right. Amanda's really disgustingly nasty to her, and how nasty she is mocking her. And Maud just hurls back and slaps her right across her stupid face. Like she really lays one on her. And of course, immediately one of the guests like pulls her off of her. And the next thing we know, Maud is like, like fired. She's at the like employment office of the nursing agency that she works for. And they're like, no, you're not going back there. Like you're done, And it's kind of clear, like she's not getting any more jobs from them for any other patients.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so then she's back at home. She's got nothing to do. She's asking God for signs. In the middle of all of this, she is, like you said, Jeff, she's trying to atone for lots of things. We don't really get a total sense of, her past until we see her start to atone, which includes taking like Amanda had given her a book of William Blake's drawings of, heaven and hell. She cuts it out. She cuts out images and puts some on her wall, collages some, and then she takes some of them, which is very creative, I thought, and like cuts them to her shoe sole size, and then punctures them with thumbtacks, like a lot of thumbtacks, each of them, so that the sharp side is sticking up. She puts them in her shoes so that and this is like in the trailer. So if you've seen the trailer, at least you've seen this. She steps into her shoes, and you could just imagine her Converse filling with blood, because that is a lot of thumbtacks, and those are some bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then she takes a walk, like you said, she takes a walk through town, and she's like gasping every time she breathes, but it's a mix of like pain and pleasure.
Yeah.
She just asks God for a sign. She feels like God is, like, why are you ignoring me? Kind of a thing.
I have a question for you right there, though.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's one thing if she wanted to inflict pain, and I know in some religions and cultures,
Mm-hmm.
they feel that that's the way to invite the presence of God and to get answers to questions or to get a sign.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that she walked through town like that. And you bringing this up a little bit earlier, I'm glad that you did. But do you think that was her way of bearing her cross? Because, I mean, going back to Jesus, when he had to carry the cross, he went through town for everyone to see, and everyone saw the pain that he was going through. But, Jesus knew that because of what he was going through, it would eventually impact anyone who would accept him. So do you think that that was her bearing the cross moment in what she was trying to do?
It's a good question. I never thought of that. That's an interesting observation. I would think to some extent. I think you're more on the money with the whole how some religion and spirituality based faiths, whatever you want to call it, every etc. We'll say etc. Not to be dismissive, but it's just it's wordy, and I'm losing words right now. So religion and etc. Like there are definitely painful sacrifices you're supposed to make, right? Um, I think it was more on that end. I think her walking through town, yeah, there's something to that. She's amongst people. Like she's doing it amongst people. Like but hers is more concealed.
Right.
So she's bearing all of this pain for no one's benefit but God and her, and herself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it kind of goes back to the whole like, is she mentally not well? Or is she following this very archaic notion that you're supposed to, like people used to self flagellate, and like whip themselves and stuff. And they really felt that that was like part of what they were supposed to do to show their faith and to show their devotion. Like she's like really old school. I mean, and she's so old school. I mean, this movie, it gives you no date, but it's also it's obviously contemporary. There's nothing to suggest that we're in the 50s or in the 20s or anything crazy, or even the 70s. Like it's happening now, and she's like a really like old fashioned character. At least what we know her as, when we know her as Maud. The way she lives is like, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's like an ascetic. I think it's like a people who are like, back in the day, like very religious and like just, it was bare bones, like, like monks, like your crucifix, your robe, and you're done, and your Bible, So I feel like it was kind of like another nod to that sort of, she's not of this time. She's not like of this world. And she's walking around doing this kind of thing. Is she mad, or is she a saint, or is she blessed? Like, is she holy? Is she holier than the rest of us? Is she holier than Coney Island? Do you know what I mean? Like she's walking right past that place with basically like what, like the equivalent of like nails on her feet, and she's doing something the rest of us wouldn't do and couldn't do. So it's kind of interesting, like, are mentally ill people, are they gifted? Are they blessed? Are they touched? The people say like, oh, that person's just touched, well, are they like, or are they not well?
Right.
And that's, I love that about this movie, but I digress. I think that it could be looked at definitely like she's making it public, but the funny thing is that it's still internalized because nobody knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
My question for you is like, what's your hot take on Amanda? She's the other main character in this movie. I mean, she's like the reason for Maud everything.
Mm-hmm.
We see Maud in relation to Amanda.
Yeah. I think with Amanda, and again, what I really love and enjoy about this film is that we tend to see the good versus evil stuff, but not in the traditional sense. Like, I mean, we're so accustomed in movies to seeing villains and good guys, but that's not how real life works. Real life is you encounter people that have a different belief system than you, and you try to have those conversations and find a common ground. But some people just are not receptive to anything, and people just have their own beliefs. And I think Amanda, for me, represents a part of our society where, like, they openly mock those who have a belief in something greater than themselves, and it almost comes across in some ways as envious because that person, something has happened possibly in their lives where that broke them from having a belief, and they see these people and they look at them like, man, I kind of wish I had that, but they can't say that, so they've got to come at it from a different way. And oftentimes it comes through mocking, or it comes through, making fun of people, or just completely dismissing anything that they say. So I think for me, Amanda, even though she was in this frail state, and it's obvious that she's dying, that she's declining, that she needs someone else's help, she's still strong-willed enough to mock someone who believes in something different than what she subscribes to. And for me, I mean, like I never watch a movie and see someone sick and I feel like, you know what, that person's a real jerk. Crap. Uh,
I was just thinking that.
but I mean, I found myself struggling with the fact of, man, like, is Maud going to just haul off and hit her one of these days because she needs it? Like, she really needs to just get slapped, some have some sense slapped into her, because even if she didn't believe anything that Maud was trying to bring into her life, the fact that Maud cared enough about her to take that extra time and really try to, not only, like you said earlier, not only take care of her physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. To not really appreciate that, because it certainly came across that she didn't appreciate that, it was unfortunate. And, I found myself when she hit Maud and Maud, I mean, when she hit Amanda and Amanda's like looking at her and the blood dripping from her nose, I'm like, you know what? Good for Maud. Good for standing up for yourself, um, because she was being a complete jerk at that party. And, and that at that point, it for me, if she had said all of those things directly to Maud, I'd still have a problem with it, but it wouldn't be as problematic. But the fact that she put that on public display to have everyone just kind of join in and, just kind of laugh at Maud, that was such a sinister move. And it's one of those things where, again, you're kind of teetering on that line of, what is Maud? Is she, what's her mental status at this point? To do that to someone, that can break anyone. I mean, I don't care how strong you think you are as a person mentally. If you encounter a situation like that, that's enough to break anyone. So for her to save all of that up and to bottle that up and just project it all at that party was just really sinister. So, for me, especially, and I know you haven't gotten to the end yet, but especially when we got that sighting at the end that we see from Maud's point of view, it just encompassed everything I think about how some in society view people uh, that do believe in God or do, consider themselves religious, or, subscribe to a faith. And, and how sometimes they can come across to people, in that way as demonic, and and just trying to, belittle everything that you believe in because they don't have that same belief system.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Question for you. Does Is there a lawsuit to be had from the events of that party?
On behalf of Maud,
You tell me, anybody. Does anybody have any litigious standing?
um, I mean, when Maud went to the agency and they said, you're lucky that you didn't get charges pressed on you. I that's something I could have defended Maud there, because she had experienced a lot of emotional abuse, I feel,
Mental cruelty?
and mental cruelty.
Yeah.
She experienced a lot, even though even though we don't necessarily see everything that she's gone through with Amanda. Um, I mean, you think about it. Amanda participated in that prayer with her, and I mean, essentially mocked her. Like, let's just be honest, especially with what we find out later. She mocked her. She made Maud feel like, what you're saying to me has been working, and I appreciate it. And then the moment that she figured out that she could use her phone to contact other people and to get this lover and all this stuff, then she dropped it, and she made a mockery of it. And honestly, Carol, I believe is her name. Um, like I wanted Maud to slap her because again, it's obvious that Amanda was seeking validation. She's seeking the ability to reach out to someone to make her feel like her former self before she got sick.
Yeah.
So at the end of it all, when Amanda, was going to pass away, Carol wasn't going to be there. The guy that we saw wasn't going to be there.
No.
Um, it was going to be more than likely Maud there at
Right.
the end. So to kind of set that up and have Maud believe that she's really that you really care, and then to pull that rug from underneath her. I mean, like I would just
Listen, I'd be an expert witness on behalf of the uh, prosecution of Amanda in this instance because that mental cruelty was just too much. And like you said, it would break anybody to be humiliated like that at a party and going back, like you said, to other events. So this could be the first case that we work on together, brother.
that's
Should be
right.
it's kind of cool.
I
You
mean,
know,
yeah,
you got to prep me. If you prep me properly, I'll be an effective witness, expert witness.
there you go. I mean, we got to have a doctor as an expert witness, so get to do that. So
Yeah. So I'm kind of going to zip along the rest of the movie and we can go back and hash it out. But basically what happens is Maud um and again, we're not given too much inner dialogue. We're not given a lot of exposition on the whys and the hows and the past, we're just where we are with Maud, which is, I think, best. I think the movie handled it the best way. She gets dressed up. She goes out on the town. She is dressed to impress. She is trying to meet men. She is drinking. Um, she's trying to insinuate herself into this group of people that are around her age that are laughing and joking, and they kind of look at her askance because like, who is this girl who's trying to like literally get into our group? We don't know her. Like, and she feels stupid. She starts to see tornadoes in the glasses of beer everywhere, and she's frightened. you know um she sort of like she goes into the alley with some guy to hook up. That doesn't really work out, so she ends up going to bed with this other dude who then assaults her. And and also is like, oh, I remember you hooked up with a friend of mine back in the day. So we do get an impression, like you had mentioned, that she's got this sordid sort of, I'm gonna say sordid because I'm not trying to slut shame her, but like I say sordid because of the way that she looks at it now. She's very ashamed and like, obviously because she's been trying to atone for this past of hers. This past where she was promiscuous and maybe not any more so than any other girl her age. Maybe she's just out like drinking and having fun with people her own age. It's just that it's so different from the Maud that we know, who is just like, no, I'm good, I just want to go to my room and pray. So she sees things that frighten her. She tries to call her friend that she had seen in the street, who called her Katie, to come out. She's very desperate for anybody. She's just desperate in general. I mean, I think that's what led her to like break away with the praying and the staying at home and just focusing on God. And she just becomes desperate for like anybody to recognize her, to like pay her some attention. She's all by herself. So none of that works out for her, clearly, and she just sort of falls deeper into this well that she's been falling into since she was fired from Amanda's. She ends up following, she kind of like stalks and follows the nurse that is Amanda's new nurse. And she comes up with a reason to talk to her while the nurse is eating her lunch out at this like these benches by the water. And then she leaves, and she just starts telling her like her God that she's ready for a sign, and God speaks back to her, and you hear this voice. We don't see anything. The camera angle is focused on facing Maud, but we hear a voice, and she's intently listening to it. She's like, "Tell me what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do?" And the voice is like, "You've always known what to do. You're like, I forget what the voice says, but something like you're awesome and you always knew what to do, and you just have to do it. Like you're good." And so she kind of wraps this bed sheet around her and puts on her rosary, and she looks legit like a monk or a saint, holy person, someone who fought, one of the apostles. Like she looks like of that tribe of people from history. She goes walking through town. She goes to Amanda's house and like makes her way in there and makes her way to Amanda's room. And Amanda sees her and she's like, "Maud, I'm so sorry for everything. Like, I'm really sorry." So you think that you're going to get kind of like a very reconciliation. You're getting a sincere reconciliation between the two of them, where she's like, "I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done what I did," etc. Maud's listening, and she's like, "I'm so glad that you're sorry, and like let's pray, and God is here, and blah blah blah, and like, do you remember like when we prayed?" And that's when it comes out. That it's like I feel like Amanda just cannot help herself being, honestly, but I mean she's like supposedly like being true to herself, but it's funny because what Amanda says, how she says it, and how she directs herself and her thoughts to Maud comes across as so much more phony and like quote unquote like worldly and full of crap than anything that Maud has done, whether she's, legitimately very mentally ill or not. Like at least Maud is sincere, and Amanda is like, "Honey, you don't understand that God doesn't exist. Like, that time that we were praying, I was just joking. Like, that was just funny. Like, you don't understand. Like, when you're sick, you need to get your jollies, like, where you can get them. And you know, you think that." You think that God is real, and it's not. It's just like your imagination kind of a thing. And just Maud that's just like the last straw, because as she's talking towards the end of her like little soliloquy, Maud is hearing her voice and seeing her as the devil, and the devil is mocking her and her faith, and the devil is like, "Look at you, like thinking that you can best me, like you're nobody and you're nothing, like you gave up on your faith, even I got the best of you. Look at where you are." And I mean, it's just like terrifying. That kind of stuff to me is terrifying, more so than any slasher movie can give me, because you don't know if what this woman is seeing is legit, like a vision, or if this woman is having a mental breakdown. And as someone who, we are very open on this show, so viewers, listeners of our show know, like I've spoken about, like, my struggles with mental health issues. There have been times in my past where I don't know if like what's happening is real or not real, and that's terrifying. So Maud is sincerely terrified at that moment. She's angry, and then on top of that, she feels an impetus to act based on her faith. She feels she needs to drive out the devil. So she just stabs Amanda to death.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on Amanda, because you know what? I feel like nobody deserves to be stabbed. I'm not saying that. But if we're talking in terms of movie parlance and the way that a movie will unfold, etc., in this movie, that character had no sense of empathy for anyone else. And I don't know what being terminally ill will do to a person. Maybe that's one of, maybe that's one of the avenues that some people with a terminal illness go down. I'm not commenting on that because I have no judgment on that. But in this movie, you can see how her own actions led to her, her demise. If she really felt that Maud was like nuts for being so faithful to God, and if she took her previous act of violence seriously, she wouldn't be there mocking her when the woman's dressed up in a bed sheet and rosary beads. Do you know? And sneaking into her house. You just don't do that. Like, if you have any sense of self-preservation, which maybe she didn't at this point, but I mean, you kind of think she does if she's still hiring nurses and she's still being tended to, you know, she would have just kept her mouth quiet and she said sorry. And then, okay, Maud, it was nice to see you. Like, why don't you go ahead and let yourself out so I can get some rest and bye bye, come by another day, But she just like couldn't help herself. She had to go there, like you said, and she had to like, oh, like, it's don't you understand? It's just a joke. Like God is doesn't and just like, oh my God, you know what? Just well, now you're gonna get killed. Like, well, now the movie has no choice, but you're gonna die. So congratulations to you. So bye bye, Amanda. And Maud, the next thing we see is Maud waking up in the morning in her studio. She wakes up and she's got these, angel wings on her. And she's like kind of like wow, like what? Like I have these angel wings that they're really beautiful. They're not like prosthetic angel wings. It's more like a special effect. They're like kind of like like a halo type, thing. So it's a really special moment. And you're wondering, this woman is now firmly in, delusions, and she's firmly psychotic, or she's having an image of something spiritual happening to her, and this is representative of her spirituality like coming out, coming alive. So the next thing we see is this really, I thought was this really touching shot of Maud walking through town, but what you see is her hand holding a plastic bag and her robe, and kind of you get that angle, like you don't see her face, you just see her hand holding a bag, and she's walking through town, and she walks onto the beach, and you have no idea at this point like what's going to happen. Like, is she going to the beach to have a nice time? Is she going to the beach to jump in the water and get baptized? I have no idea, and it's perfect. So she goes onto the beach and she begins dousing herself with something. And this is major. I mean, this whole episode is spoiler alerts because we talk about the whole movie from top to bottom on our show. So, and people are starting to notice what she's doing. And you can't tell if they are like screaming, like, oh my God, what the heck? Or if they're like, oh my God, because we see them like genuflecting. From her point of view, they're genuflecting, and she is dousing herself, and she self-immolates. She lights a match and lights herself on fire. But what we see is not someone like burning like that. It's more of this like holy miracle, and I think like the sky, something
Yeah.
with before she leaves, like she sees that the clouds are like moving, and there's like almost like a tornado or something in the sky. I can't really remember, but it's something to do with the sky. And she has looked at the sky and the clouds as messages, as like physical messages, physical, I should say, manifestations of God's messages to her, like confirmation at times. So we're aware of this language that she has for herself. So the sky is opening up and she's lighting herself on fire. And we see people all around the beach, like facing her and genuflecting. They're kneeling, they're, and we see her, she's like in ecstasy, again. And then for the last split second of this movie, you see her howling in horror, and you see her like skin and her mouth open, and it's all black, and you see flames, and you hear people screaming. I think, if I remember speaking, if I made that mistake, I'm sorry, but in my mind they're screaming, and she's just, but it's so quick, it's like all of 2 seconds, and that's it, and then that's the end of the movie. And I was like, you know what, genius, perfect, well done, no pun intended.
Oh, that's good. That's a good.
Yeah, I thought that is. Oh, and she says, "Glory to God." She says, "Glory to God," but she says it in a different language. I think it's Welsh. Yeah. And she says that. Yeah, I mean, if you read anything about the movie, it will say that, like, she's having this, sort of like miraculous experience in her mind, but then the last cut of the movie is her, and like what's happening in reality. She's screaming in horror, and she's burning alive, and it's disgusting. But Attorney Watson, I would like to ask you, if I may approach. I know you're not a judge, but I still think we should, a little reverence, to the attorney at hand. If I may approach, is it fair to say that that was the reality of what happened? I mean, clearly, clearly in our world's reality, if you burn yourself, you're going to be burning, and your flesh is going to turn black, and you're going to be, in pain. But like, was that the reality? I mean, is that even a question? I'm questioning it.
Yeah.
What does the law have to say?
I mean, I think with that last shot, that's not Maud's reality. I think we saw Maud's reality. But in that brief split second, that's what the rest of us see. Because
okay, so you feel like it could be both?
I think it could be both. I mean, I think, I think it's important that we get both shots at the end. Like, we get the angelic event, that's happening, where it's like she's being called up to heaven almost. The skies open up, and that's she's finally achieved what it is that she wanted to do, and that she felt she had been called to do, and now she's ascending. But then at the very end, which kind of goes back to my point in theory, a lot of times when people see religious sacrifices, or they see people that completely give themselves to their religion or faith, they see that event as happening completely different as the experience itself. So outwardly, other people are seeing this woman being charred, while alive. While, is she really feeling pain at all? Do we know that? And I think that's the brilliance of the ending, is that we're left to say what was real with a lot of things that happened, and what was Maud's reality. I don't think this movie is a case of what was real and what was fake. I think it's a case of what did we see outwardly? What is it that that typical people see when we see a person of faith doing things in this manner, and what is it that the person of faith is experiencing in those moments? Now, I mean, we can look at it from a mental health perspective, and certainly there were some points during the movie where you can definitely see that Maud had her struggles and she had her demons. But at the same time, what may be real to one person, that person can't always get that same experience as the other person. So I think that was the brilliance of the ending of the movie, is that, it's really our interpretation. Was Maud actually a saint, or did we just witness someone, you know, who was confused? You
Hmm.
know, I think I think it's a brilliant way to end the movie.
Same, same. I think we're left with that debate. You
Hmm.
know, um, and I think this movie. I just want to throw it out there because I think we haven't mentioned this yet. I think this movie is, um, it's very intense, obviously, but I think this movie is okay for non-believers to watch. Also, I
Oh
think
yeah,
it's definitely. I just don't. I know we've been talking a lot about issues of faith. Well, because the movie requires us to, but also because I think I don't know. I'm interested in those questions. I don't want to speak for you, but I think you are too. Um, and I think it's important to open ourselves up to these kind of questions, um, and see from the other perspective. Because I definitely think what this movie is doing, in my opinion, what this movie is doing is taking on the question of mental health. Mental health, mental illness, however you want to describe it. I think it's done in the guise of cleverly of a question that most people will wrestle with at some point in their lives in terms of, does God exist? Does God not exist? If so, what role does it play in our lives? Or I live comfortably without the notion of God, So, um,
and I had actually one other thing I wanted to say
mhm.
about the religious aspect that I picked up on, um, in this film, and it's for Maud. It's almost as if she had a thought that she deemed impure, or that she felt like was not in direct alignment with God, she would, immediately be down on herself. She punish herself. Because that's what she felt the need to do. And
Right.
what I mentioned earlier about religion, I think it's so important for people to understand that just because you're a person of faith, just because you subscribe to a certain religion, doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. I don't think God calls us to be perfect. I think He calls us to be faithful and love one another. I think anytime you start to go beyond that, then you start to convolute what it is that religion and faith should be, and you turn it into a corporate, or a society based question of, basically like a judgment contest of, well, this person doesn't live this way, so they can't be Christian, or this person says these words, so they can't
Right.
have faith. So I think that's also, like, on top of the mental health, at least for me, it also begs the question: do people of faith go too far with their pursuits of trying to be perfect in order to please God? When in reality, if you are a person of faith, the fact that you accept, you know, God, and you're trying to live accordingly is is in and of itself, enough. Like, you're trying to do the things that you're supposed to do, and obviously,
Hmm.
have slip ups along the way. But that was my takeaway from that too.
I didn't consider that. But definitely I could see it. I could see it. You know, so much of the movie is like her just like really like having at it and like beating herself up and really just doing every single thing like and we see her like perfectionism. I think it comes out best when we see the early scenes of her taking care of Amanda. everything is perfect on that tray. Everything that she does with Amanda is like, there's not a movement she makes that's like out of step, and yeah, there's definitely that question of, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Am I perfect enough? So, all right, so let's wrap this up because we need to get to our ratings. Jeff, on our show, as you know, we will rate a movie based on our rating system of headstones, 1 to 5, 1 being meh, not really, 5 being absolutely 2 thumbs up. So for Saint Maud, how many headstones?
I'm going to say 4.5.
Wow, awesome.
I'm going to say 4.5. I thought it was that good. I thought it was that well done. And honestly, the questions that it poses that you're left to answer after viewing, I absolutely love movies like that. So yeah, 4.5.
Would you get any aspect of this movie tattooed on your arm?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you said, there are a few things that really scare me. Slashers aren't one of them, but that scene with Amanda near the end, that kind of stuff terrifies me. So
Same.
I would not get any ink of this movie. What about you? Only 2 questions.
Okay. I am going to totally copy you, I think, in terms of the answers. 4.5 headstones, because this movie was just perfect, Um, probably I could have done with just being selfish, like a little bit of a soundtrack that I could, take away.
Yeah.
Maybe that's, but um, yes, I think I'm looking at this movie as a movie about mental health and faith. So I think that it's near perfection. And in terms of ink, I don't think I would, because, like you said, there's a lot. This movie to me is super dark,
Yeah.
and it touches on a lot of issues that are like personally like very sensitive to me, that can be very terrifying. So it's like, no, I don't think so. I don't want reminders of scary things on my arm.
Oh, not at all.
No. So, Jeff, thank you so much for, I don't know, just being a great co-host. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you. And
I've
thank
been
you.
looking forward to what?
Thank you for the same. You're awesome.
Nice. And thank you, dear listener and dear viewer. I believe this may mark our debut on YouTube. Eek. I'm not sure. We're not sure yet. We'll see. Probably. Probably. But
It's,
okay.
yeah.
But where you can find us at movies to be murdered by at gmail.com. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and we thank you, we appreciate you, and we shall see you next week. Bye.
Game over.